Welcome back. All right, news of the day video for all you fine people on the internet for your Saturday, December the 7th. A lot of injury discussion and some discussion too from early games. So if you don't want a spoiler for the early games, this may not be the video for you. So let us go ahead and jump in, talking about the Colorado Avalanche at the top of the board. Ross Colton returns tonight. This is against the Detroit Red Wings. Colton's been out for quite some time. Colton was red hot at the time of the injury, so I'm sure Avs fans will be hoping that he picks up where he left off, and we'll see how this changes the lines and how this changes the chemistry. The Avalanche are a team that generally have not had problems with getting the puck into the other team's net. It's been goals at their own end that have been a problem. So we'll see with Colton coming back how that changes things for Colorado against a Detroit team that should be just as desperate as they will be. So in other injury news, Will Smith of the San Jose Sharks dealing with an upper body injury. He's labeled as day to day. Will Smith's been picking it up lately. So much like I mentioned with Colton, the hope you would have is that Smith missing time won't, cause any kind of disruption to what's been a pretty strong run for him. Rasmus Dahlin, who did not play the game today for Buffalo against Utah, still dealing with back spasms, being evaluated for that. As we've talked about before, this can be one of those very unpredictable injuries, and so, all the best to Dahlin dealing with this right now. Whereas coming out of the game, Lindy Ruff sounds very fed up right now. This is 6 straight losses for the Buffalo Sabres. And talking about how often they went offside, which I didn't put on the board because when a team's going offside repeatedly, I don't generally make that a note on the board. But it was maybe noteworthy because this team is the communication's not there, the confidence doesn't seem to be there, and when you're going offside that much and there's just little mental errors going on in the game, that very often can end up being, that kind of play, something that leads to a change behind the bench. But they just hired Lindy Ruff. So you're not making a change behind the bench this early, obviously. And this is where it comes back to Kevyn Adams. There's an article I saw today, too. I think it's on Sportsnet about how fed up Buffalo fans are. And we might be to the point where I need to do another video on the Buffalo Sabres. And it feels like I'm kind of picking on them because every year we do videos on the Sabres and how they've had their struggles, but it does feel like we're getting into video territory again with Buffalo. Max Pacioretty activated by the Toronto Maple Leafs as they also put McCabe on IR. It's retroactive to, I think, November 30th is where it's retroactive to. So again, this is about accruing cap space and having your money all figured out and all that, and it's all that whole capologist side of things. But Pacioretty being activated, good news for Toronto. They're starting to get guys back. I haven't heard anything with Domi yet, so my assumption is Domi wouldn't be playing tonight either. But we'll see what happens there. Pacioretty being activated is good news for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and he was playing pretty well at the time of his injury as well. Lyon and Talbot, speaking of injuries, 2 goaltenders for Detroit that have been injured for a bit here. They're both out for at least the next 2 games. They're both listed as having lower body injuries. This means Ville Husso is going to get a couple more starts, and it gives Husso a bit of a chance to show he can still, be a good NHL goaltender. I think he's been okay for them so far, and so, yeah, he's going to get, I would think, the next 2 starts at the very least to show what he can do. So all the best to Husso as well as for Lyon and Talbot, who they definitely need in the lineup. But this is part of the reason why if you're Detroit, you carry 3 goaltenders, because this can happen. Sorensen is the first Swedish-born head coach in the National Hockey League. After the first, of course, between Winnipeg and Chicago, and they were talking about this with Anders Sorensen, and it is kind of a historic thing. And as I mentioned when Luke Richardson got fired, I hope Sorensen makes the argument that he should be the coach and he stays. Because European-born coaches absolutely can coach in the National Hockey League. I just think it's kind of silly that you look at the head coaching position in the National Hockey League and it's always North American-born coaches. And yet, there's a lot of European-born players, so since they can play the game, they can probably coach it as well. So Sorensen gets a chance, and so here's to hoping that things get a little better for Chicago, so he sticks around, gets that interim tag gone, and maybe we finally see general managers and owners thinking about hiring people to run the bench who are European-born. I don't see any reason why that shouldn't be the case. Tortorella was choked after tonight's game against Boston. Well, this morning's game against Boston. And he says maybe he should start teaching his players how to dive. Now, the responses to that I saw on social media were, oh, no, they already know how to dive. We've watched it. But he was not happy with the calls today. Says he was proud of the team for the effort they put in. Tortorella's a fiery personality. I think that as the coach of the Flyers, he's going to probably get more wins out of them than another coach might. And moments like this, I think, are just frustration that the team is just this so close to potentially being above that playoff line and going on a bit of a run. But they don't really have... Like, Michkov is a very talented player, and today he becomes only the third Flyers teenager to have multi-point games, 3 games in a row. I know Lindros is one of them. Was Van Riemsdyk the other? At any rate, there were 3 that I saw. Two listed, and Michkov becomes the third. So let me know your thoughts. If you're a Flyers fan, do you feel like the Bruins were diving today? Do you feel like the Flyers were fighting their way through things that if they'd fallen down that they would have got calls on? Let me know your thoughts. As expected, Brendan Lemieux clears waivers. He was waived yesterday by the Carolina Hurricanes for the second time this season, this time to terminate the contract. So his contract's terminated. He's an unrestricted free agent. My expectation is he's probably headed to the KHL or he'll head over to Europe. It is a viable option for hockey players who aren't at the NHL level, who maybe don't want to be riding the buses in the AHL. Makes some sense. So do they still ride the buses? I feel like in many cases they probably still do. Not every case, but probably in many cases. So yeah, Lemieux clearing. He's an unrestricted free agent. And speaking of AHL too, I'm starting to think about doing a video on the AHL's attendance. I did a video on the NHL's today. I think the AHL's would be very interesting because where I am locally here in Abbotsford, a lot of empty seats this year and a lot of discussion about why there's so many empty seats in Abbotsford. Jacob Trouba admitting that he didn't really like how all of this became public and that, playing in New York, that's kind of something that happens. I didn't see where he named Chris Drury or necessarily threw him under the bus, but it was definitely adjacent to the bus. And so apparently Trouba blocked a trade to Columbus, and he and his wife got together and discussed it and agreed that a trade to Anaheim was the best option for him. And he said, too, that if it came to next summer, him choosing between his family or his playing career, he's going to pick his family every time. So I honestly, I don't have a problem with that sentiment from Jacob Trouba. I know that there's a lot of people who don't necessarily like Trouba. The one thing to keep in mind is it is usually management that he's arguing with. It's not usually his teammates. His teammates have usually been very praising of him. And so... at least from my recollection of his time in Winnipeg as well as his time in New York, his teammates have always talked a lot about him, and he was captain with the New York Rangers in part because the players respected him. So he takes that experience now to Anaheim and will definitely change that blue line. Pat Verbeek saying as well that he feels like there's a little more offense in Trouba's game than what we've seen so far this year. So Anaheim pretty optimistic about what Trouba can do for the team. And we'll see how that all turns out over the coming months. Goalie is returning to the lineup tonight for the Montreal Canadiens. He missed last night's game against Nashville with an illness. Of course, Montreal won that game 3-0, so they ended up being okay without him, but they're going to be much happier to have him back in the lineup. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe in the event you may not have done so already. Thank you guys so much for watching. Because it's hockey all day, I will be trying to fit in videos where I can during intermissions and such. And we'll see what else I come up with for the rest of today. Thank you guys so much for all your support. Hit like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. I will talk to you again soon.